welcome to Joseph's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need to like, follow, or subscribe to any of the content I put out there. I just put it out there where I can and have a holly jolly great time doing so. I'd like to welcome you all to an express edition. We did one of these earlier where we talked about some tips and tricks for do's and don'ts and things to do with how to make the trees look a little more realistic and things like that. Well, this isn't one of the numbered videos in my series. If you're not following me, by all means, check them out accordingly. I just wanted to do a quick express series talking to you about concreting, and if I knew what I knew now, I probably would have done all the concreting on the layout a little bit differently to what I'm doing today. In fact, here's a tremendous one, and I'm going to bring in a picture here if we just reverse the image around. And what we've got here is the bowling alley, and you can see we've got a little bit of concreting at the front and there's a little bit at the back with different textures, and I'll point that out and you'll see why later. But for the moment, this is the process. In a lot of the videos, you'll see me using this XPS styrofoam, or not styrofoam, but foam board. It's very good for carving out scenery and doing things like that. And I often use a Mod Podge as a base, and we create some lovely things. And if you watch the video regarding the bridge, and I'm sure there's a link to it somewhere around here, you'll see how we carved roadways and a concrete footpath and things like that. And the tips that are on that are applicable. However, sometimes I just need some concrete looking areas, and we generally may just use balsa wood or a timber underneath, or nothing. You're just scribing it straight into your chipboard or plywood or MDF or whatever you're using. The other option some people may go for would be from Scale Model Scenery. They do this wonderful LX096- I've got 00-A. I know they do it in N scale as well, but this is the hard standing concreting, and it comes with the various bits to get it so you can just slide in. And here it is, a laser cut kit, and it's sitting on some of this material, which is like an MDF that's got to be something like about 1 mil high or whatever it is, I can't recall. But the interesting thing about it is a very versatile product. And as you've seen me use before, when you've bought one kit, this is very useful. Whether you snap off the other bits of the sprue to do even the scrap bits for building little retaining walls and things like that, really, really good stuff. But I wanted to talk to you about the concreting. First of all, it's worth pointing out that with the actual kit, it does come with the TX134-00, which is just basically a piece of nicely printed paper with the finish you may be looking for on it. And it is good. And actually, if we take another quick picture over here, a similar kit that we used for the pedestrian crossings, which we can barely see probably off camera, is being used just here. And we have another one being used down near the station. It's quite good, but on particular angles and depending on the light, it can be a bit reflective. And I like more of a textured kind of a base to it. So it's an option. That's the fastest way. Tick 1 for Scale Model Scenery. For those of you that are looking to get a little more out of this look, join me for this quick video today, because in less than 10 minutes of actual time you'll need to work, you will yield some tremendous results. So join me today as I like to introduce to us our little guard here waving his flag. We don't have to have a guard there if you don't like it. You can take it off. We've talked about the figures and how we do that later. But here's just a little bit of concreting. The video you're going to be seeing coming up, we go back to some more concreting around the shed. However, some of the things I mentioned in there are, the process I'm going to show you now is, if I knew it today, is what I would have done on the entire build. So it's a really, really quick one. Basically, how did we create this just using a handful of tools and keeping the budget well down? Let's check it out, shall we? So again, here is the kit LX096-00A from Scale Model Scenery. And I like to use this AK Terrains concrete, and we're just going to use a Vallejo wash. I'm using a dark grey, but you can use a lighter one. Now, it comes out a bit like a little bit of a grainy toothpaste, this concrete. And I'm not using too much, and it's one of those things that once you start to drop a little bit of water onto it, a little does go a long way. But basically, just slap it down as if you were crust to crust buttering a piece of bread or something like that. Just try and get it into all those key spots at the moment for a bit of a semi-even coverage. Now we can take a little bit of water and then we just start to sort of smooth it out. Now again, if you actually thin it down, depending on what you're trying to do, getting a thinner type of a texture, if you've had to pre-carve your expansion joints and things like that, so be it. But I find the grainy texture at this scale is not really worth pre-doing anything. That's why I think this is the way to go. So we just get a bit of that concrete down onto this timber at the moment. And we're just going to, the other thing is we sort of got a pretty good coverage. We'll come around and clean up the edges. Just to give a bit of a straight edge where we can. Doesn't have to be perfect. We can sand that later. But now we're just going to take some paper towel or a cloth or something just to clean your spatula there, and then come with a bit more water, and then we're just going to start smoothing it over to get that nice sort of finish, depending on what you need. You may need something that's a little more coarse, but you want something, in my case, something that a double O or HO figure that goes down, it seems as though they're walking on concrete, nothing too gnarly or wobbly. So once it's done, I like to let it dry. Personally, I like to let it dry overnight, but 2 hours to 3 hours is generally enough. Now, I did stuff up the lighting on the camera on this section here, but it is right. This is where you're going to measure in and scribe in some of your expansion joints as needed, and you'll scale and measure as needed. In my case, there are only 2 because the section it's going into, I'm following what's already in place. So I just made a quick mark with a mechanical pencil or something like that. Then I'm just taking any blade and just running a few light passes over it. You'll see I'll even twist it on a slight angle there, depending on how harsh I want it to be. But once I've got it open, you'll notice here I'm going to reverse the blade upside down, and I will generally just sort of expand the joint out, so to speak. Then we're going to take a paintbrush. Get any of your cheap ones and snip it down. So I'm showing one there, and then get one so it becomes a little bit stiffer. That way we can really flick out any of that fine sort of MDF dust or what have you, and it sort of starts giving that kind of appearance of what happens to expansion joints. Once we're done, we're just going to take a little bit of wash. We're just going to use the dark wash because of the area I'm doing with locomotives and that. If this was a car park or something, you might not do anything. But what we do is we just take a trusty little sponge here. Any sponge will do. We'll just put a little bit of this on it and then just dab it down. That's really as technical as this section gets. Now don't worry if it looks like I'm going just a little bit too heavy here, because it doesn't. Just check out the capillary action as we slow it down, as it starts to bleed through the expansion joint. As you've done this a few times, you'll really get a good feeling for how and what to do, the reaction. It becomes very fluid, literally, in what you're doing. But let's just carry on. We're just going to keep dabbing with this. Get a nice bit of even coverage, because this is filling in those gaps particularly. This is the key thing that I did some other steps before and I wasn't too happy with. Once you've got it down, what you can do is take the other end of the sponge you didn't have paint on. So we just reverse it around now. And then we can just sort of, depending on what you need, you can start bleeding it off here. You can just blot out and start returning it back. You can even, if needed, or you really weren't too happy, you could always just dilute the sponge in a bit of water, wring it out and come back, and you can see it starts lightening up, and this is getting it. Because, as you can see with the train track here on the one side, it's where the trains will pass. I'm just going to do a little bit of an extra, because there might be that sort of deposit of the oil and grime that might be in the yard. You don't need to do this, and we come back and deal with this with weathering powder. But sometimes if you've got a sponge that's still wet and there are areas, or maybe it's where there's going to be a building sitting or a shady part of the scene you're creating, just create that bit of a heavier look to it. And now we just leave it to dry. This stuff is very quick. In fact, by the time you've got the lid on and cleaned your hands up ready to go again, it's pretty much dry.
So there you go. It's not all that bad now, is it? The whole process, apart from drying the concrete, which is usually a couple of hours or overnight with big slabs, is what I recommend. But even just putting that wash on it, that's pretty much instant and fills in these nicely. For those of you that are sticking with me, a couple of extra steps if you're interested. to take this a little further, I'm just going to take, well, you can use weathering powder. Actually, I'm just using pastels here. So I'll just take in my blade and run it across one of the sticks, depending on the color I need. I'm using a bit of a black and some gray mixed up here. And I'm also going to take some Peco brake dust, even though I like to do more of this later on when it's actually in its final scene. But we just dab some of the powders on as required with the brush, and then we can brush it accordingly. I like to do a little bit later, depending on what the scene is. Maybe there's someone, there needs to be footprints, maybe something's happened. But then we're going to take our light olive drab. Now, this is the weapon you must have. 1 drop is all you're going to need. It goes a long way. I usually dip my fine brush into a little bit of water here to dilute it a little bit. And we're just going to work it into some key spots of interest, usually around the edges of the expansion joints and the edges of the concrete. Generally, you get these little mold type of deposits that start to build up, that kind of algae sort of looking. And I'm just going to take an old brush and sort of just rough it in a little bit there, nothing major. But you can see it does add that nice kind of dimension. Just a little drop of PVA just to finish off this, but you get the idea what I'm doing here. I'll take a toothpick, I'll take some of that PVA and just in a few little key places, I'm just going to put the glue down, and we're going to then just sprinkle a little bit of fine turf. Again, once the scene's in place, we can add tufts and things like that, depending on how weathered we need to see it. But just take your fine turf and just liberally put it over where the glue is.
Right, well, once we've got that, we can just get rid of that excess that we don't need, recycle that straight back in the hopper, depending on how big your recycle that straight back in, depending on how big the project is. I like to use this parchment paper laid down, and then you can scoop it and keep recycling. But for a little demonstration like this, I think we're absolutely fine here. And there we go. It's a quick and easy way to texture up and get a little bit of interest going on what would be just a standard concrete slab.
Not so very long ago, in the top left-hand corner of Wales, there was a railway. It wasn't a very long railway or a very important railway, but it was called the Meirionydd and Llantysilio Rail.
Well, here we are. Isn't that fantastic? And just a couple of top takeaway tips from turning this into this. The first one I just wanted to point out is, heaven forbid you're doing the section that runs in between the rails, or something's not quite fitting up the way you expect it. The great thing with this is, I generally just take a sheet of sandpaper, lay it down, and then just grind off any of the bits that there might have been a bit of overspill of that concrete or something. It just glides right off in a few passes, and you've got your beautiful straight edges that you've had before. The other thing is, there's no cleaning up after you've sanded it as well. You're going to end up with this kind of finish, whereas a little bit of lighter and darker concrete, it just looks right. You don't have to do anything extra. So that's a win-win. Because in previous videos, I went back to try and paint or cover it up a little bit, in which case it then overlapped or bled onto it, soaked in, and it was just not looking good. So this is a good way to go. Your blade is definitely one of your best friends. You'll recall when I was scribing out the concrete, and if you haven't seen it, check out the Petroleum Depot series in videos. I think my expansion joints are a bit too big. I opened them up a bit too much, the detail, and then I separately painted them, and that was going on another video that was to do with using our foam board material. Now, if I was going up to a slightly larger scale, O scale or something like that, that is the way to do it. As I said, for what I'm doing in OO or HO World for other people, I think just that nice lightly scribed line is the way to go. The AK Terrains concrete, I think, is wonderful, and less is definitely more in this application. So a container like this would have comfortably have done all of my concreting needs on the model railway to this date, and I still would have some left in the pot if needed. But we're going to come back and talk to you about that in another video, because it's more than just concrete. There are some other hidden surprises, and as some of you have seen during part build of the Faulty Towers, particularly with the fence, if you haven't seen it, go back and check out the Faulty Towers build, and we are still currently building the hotel at the moment. But check out another great use for this, because it's more than just trying to make concrete. The other thing, of course, we've got is a wash. Now, I used a darker wash because of where it's going to be. I've got the lighter grey wash as well, and that could be quite good, especially if it's more of a car park or something like that you're chasing. And again, I refer you back to an image, and you'll see on the back of our bowling alley here where the contrast between the car park concreting and what would be the back where your dumpsters and all the rest of it are, it's slightly different shading. Again, apart from using your pastels and or weathering powders. For those of you that may be having a bit of a struggle finding these pastels I go on about, you'll find them at most stationery shops and things like that. Now, it's not the oil ones you may have used in art class when you're at school. It's kind of what almost, they look a bit like a chalk, so to speak. And you'll often buy them in these big packs because I basically want these colors. But to get these colors, I need the rest. And if you look at any of the other boxes I've bought, I've never touched any of the others, but they could be used in an application where you're scribbling down a bit of chalk on a hopscotch course or something like that. But this is what they are. They're a solid, almost chalk thing, and I just scrape them off with a razor blade. And I think probably one of the easily top 5 most valuable landscaping tools you need in your model railway artillery. We'll come back and look a bit more at that, coming back to this, with how we fill it in with the joins with the track and how useful that stuff really is. So really, you can pick up some pastels for a few dollars. A bottle of that wash is maybe $5, and that concrete is about $10 or $15 depending on where you live, and you can keep yielding a lot of concrete for that. And this can be used on any particular type of substrate you're liking. Again, balsa wood, you could be using a thicker type of plywood, you could be using an MDF, it could be whatever. I think it's an absolutely fast, easy way to get wonderful looking concrete. We will now return to your scheduled broadcast in the next video. So you can disregard half the video if you like, because I was still playing around with some other ways to pre-concrete and pre-do the expansion joints. I wasn't super duper happy. It doesn't really matter. This is it. And even though it's, as I can see at the moment, maybe the last piece of concreting I need to do at the moment that's going to sit back here, this one piece is the piece that is right the most. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for joining me. Girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, I certainly hope you enjoyed this little express edition of what we can do, and look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Please do stay safe. Toodles!